You will be doing an bibliography, a little bit of research first, then we're going to be your digital essay, and things like that. First thing is, as a genre, the purpose is to gather and present information about useful sources on a given issue. So it looks like, again, a works cited page. You just have bibliography, bibliographic citations, but then with each one you have a paragraph of information about that source. Usually it's present tense, usually it's very objective in tone, usually in terms of what it includes the main point, information about credibility and usefulness, maybe it's a little summary, and sometimes for classes, your professor might ask you to include a reflection. What you're going to include is a bibliographic citation, a summary, which includes the main point and summary details, usefulness, so what it contributes to the conversation, and then credibility, author expertise, potential author bias if it's relevant, if there's no author, relevant publisher information, things like that. For each source, you're going to provide a bibliographic citation, access to the source, and approximately 125 words. So I would say anywhere between 100 and 150 words, so around 125 is your average. Your annotation should include answers to these types of questions. What is the source about? So main points, and then details that break down how the writer accomplishes that main goal. How does it fit or contribute to the bigger conversation? And who is behind it and why? So we're going to start with your summaries. So that first part of the annotation, you need a strong first sentence that introduces the source using specific information. It mentions the author, genre, title, things like that, and presents the main point or goal. Try not to use the term source because it's vague. It doesn't tell us if it's a book, a documentary, a blog, a news article, book chapter, that kind of thing. And you want to offer specific information about that source. You want that first sentence to pack a lot of punch about what the main point is and what the source is. You want to stay focused. So you want to keep it down to what is the main point, the thesis statement, and what are the actual main points. So conciseness is not about saying less or cutting out necessary details or being less developed. Conciseness is about careful language choice and staying focused, choosing the most relevant things to say and saying them clearly in as few words as possible. So you want to make sure you're being very concise, but you're getting in those necessary details, and you're staying in present tense. The author says, the article states, that kind of stuff. This can be tricky. It's okay to use past tense when referencing information the source talks about. For example, the article references the 1994 news article reporting on the shooting that occurred. Well, occurred is past tense, but I started with the article references. So references to what the source itself is saying is in present tense. Paraphrases to show understanding. Paraphrasing, putting things in your own words, that shows understanding. Over-relying on lots of quotes to do it for you doesn't necessarily show understanding. So part of what we're doing is putting things in your own words and staying objective. We're not constructing an argument with this document. Everything should be objective. The reader should not be able to discern your opinion on the issue. So we're going to do things like use signal phrases, which I'll talk more about in a second. According to the author, many supporters maintain, the article states, the study concludes, that kind of stuff in your summary details specifically. Avoid evaluative terms to describe points, evaluative adjectives, things like this article does a remarkable job, or this source does a poor job, things like that. Sorry, I got another one of these popping up. Avoid asking questions, avoid personal pronouns. We'll look at examples of this in the coming slides. So first, here's an example. I used an older source from 1992. Forgive me for that. The source breaks down several aspects of depression. This is just the beginning part, just the summary part of the annotation. The source breaks down several aspects of depression, starting with age groups. The authors do a remarkable job comparing all differences in all ages between children and adolescents. They go in depth about all different causes and types of depression. They also discuss possible outcomes of depression along with treatments. This is a fine summary. A better summary would be this book by Muhammad Shafi and Sharon Lee Shafi. So the authors themselves followed and the specific genre that it is, breaks among various stages of child development from infancy to adolescence. The authors detail bipolar depression and seasonal mood disorders as well as their causes. Finally, they explain possible outcomes, assessments, and treatments of diverse types of depression across varying ages. So a much stronger first sentence, more specific author details, summary details. Here's another example with a strong first sentence and the summary details. In this article, Nestor Lopez Duran discusses a 2009 longitudinal study examining, we know it's an article, we know who the author is, we know it's a 2009 longitudinal study, and we know what it was looking at. Okay. Lopez Duran states that findings point to bullying as having different levels of consequences for his victims. He notes that study results experience psychotic disorder likely have a history of victimization and that being bullied during childhood doubles the risk of developing psychotic symptoms. Finally, he examines possibilities why these children are at high risk of developing psychotic disorders and discusses the dose response, which deals with effects based on how often a child is bullied. So very strong summary details using those author signals. Lopez Duran states, he notes, he examines. Very objective, strong first sentence. What if you can't find the author? What do you do? If you don't know the organization, the company, any of those things. So in this case, they're going to do the American Legion instead of the article because that's who it's by. So notice there's no author right here. So instead they're going to include information about the organization. The American Legion is a nonpartisan organization devoted to the support of veterans. It is a well-known organization that has been up and helping our veterans and servicemen and women since 1919. So we have both here. We have the inclusion of, they still included the organization in that first sentence, even though there was no author, included who they are and a little bit about what they do. So that's what you do if you have no author. So again, going back to those signal phrases, one of the reasons we use these is it helps create a third-person objective perspective. It attributes opinions and actions to the appropriate party. It creates that writerly distance. Like, according to the article, I know that this came from the article. If you say global warming is real, it sounds like you're saying it. But if you say, according to the article, global warming is real, now I know that you're being objective and you're keeping that writerly distance. It also makes distinctions between the writer and the source clear. I know this is coming from this source or this study. I know exactly who to attribute this opinion to. It's very helpful in summary details, and it's an expectation in academic writing. So again, Nestor Lopez Duran discusses, Lopez Duran states, he notes, he examines. So putting one of these at the beginning of each of those summary detail sentences, they even do it in the first sentence. Okay, next point you're going to do is the contribution to the conversation. So questions to ask yourself about how a source fits into the conversation or helps you answer your guiding research question. Is this research specifically strong and credible because it's from a scholar? So is it a peer-reviewed article from a scholar? Does it represent a loud voice or perspective, even if there's some bias, like a popular documentary? Is it foundational? So is it like, for instance, when we're talking about do vaccines cause autism, there was a foundational study in 1999 that caused this conversation to begin, that kind of sparked this debate. So you would want to include that study because it's foundational. Is it older, but it's necessary to provide background on the issue? Does it offer primary testimonies or firsthand accounts? Does it explore a new theory or a new solution that readers might need to know and may not be aware of? Does it explore a particular perspective or set of concerns readers need to understand? So basically, what does this do? How does it add something to the conversation? Remember, avoid adding your own opinion about the issue itself or discussing how you plan to use it in the paper. This is about what this source adds to the conversation that's helpful to your audience, to a reader. I want to look at this common error. Sorry, let me get down here. This common error that people will use. So this is the previous example that we looked at. The source breaks down several aspects of depression. So that example, they included information about the author, and then they included a note about the usefulness of the contribution of the conversation. The source is very useful for research and in understanding the topic better. This is a common error where people will note that it is useful, but forget to specify why. Why is this useful? How does it help you understand the topic better? What information about the topic does it provide? That's what you want to make sure you cover. So here's an example from one of the previous examples. In this article, Nestor Lopez Duran discusses, oops, I accidentally moved the window, I didn't mean to do that. So what it adds to the conversation. This is a recent study, so it's recent. It was recent at the time. And this presentation of possibilities and symptoms aids in understanding how effects could be interrelated and mutually causational. So we know, again, what specifically this adds to the conversation. And here's an example of a common error. I believe this will be helpful because this article has an enormous amount of information that I can use for my research paper. Again, your reader doesn't care how you plan to use it individually, only how they can use it. Some of the information I could use would be possible regulations, trends and developments, dominant business models, and relevant stakeholders. I think it's okay to use this article due to it coming from an institute that specializes in management. So there's ways you could pull things from this and say, like, this article is relevant because it includes possible regulations, trends and developments, and dominant business models and relevant stakeholders. You could word it that way. But again, you're placing this for everyone, for your readers also, not just what you plan to do with it, which is something you want to avoid. Credibility. So we're going to talk about author background. So what does the author's expertise? Do they have personal, professional, scholarly expertise, something to think about? What proof exists? Does the author have a stake or bias? What are their credentials? Do they have a political slant? So if there is a bias, that's worth noting. Do they have any publications? Do they have specific education or a profession? Like, are they a doctor of psychology at such and such university? What is it that they do that makes them an expert? For instance, Lopez Duran is currently an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, where he researches mood disorders concerning children and adolescents. He also coordinates neuropsychology assessment services at the University Center for Child and the Family and is an editor for child psych research. So again, we know exactly what he's involved in, what his expertise is. So here's the whole thing together. So you have a strong first sentence, followed by summary details, followed by a statement about how it's useful, followed by the author background. And that is the whole thing. And I want to look at a sample bibliography really quick so you can kind of see how it looks. So here's the introduction. And again, the introduction follow-up includes a couple of different things. It includes, objective language, and it hits 3 prompts. It includes the problem, the reason for the research, and the LOI, the specific question or statement about what the research will explore. So here's what she did. Here's the problem. Multi-level marketing appeals to those desiring to work from home, primarily stay-at-home parents. However, the structure and function of this type of business model has often been compared to the illegal pyramid scheme. Followed by the reason for the research. It is debated whether or not someone can be successful in multi-level marketing and whether or not the business structure is ethical. Followed by the specific LOI. This research will explore the different aspects of multi-level marketing and the different ways that those specific aspects impact those involved. It will also analyze the similarities and differences between pyramid schemes and multi-level marketing. So again, you've got the problem, the reason for the research, and the LOI. Very objective, no thesis statement, no opinion. It specifically gets into what the problem is, what the reason for the research is, and what the research is going to explore. And again, another sample, strong first sentence in this article. Bridget Reed explains the appeal of multi-level marketing during the coronavirus pandemic, followed by summary details. She gives her accounts of interviews with women who were affected. The author explains how someone's need for companionship and a way to make money could lead them to being recruited by an MLM. Reed says, so she's using the author signals as well. Reed says that these companies promise a lot to especially vulnerable women in these times. So again, this writer didn't say that these companies promise a lot to especially vulnerable women. The author did. That's what signal phrases do, what they help clarify. This article was relevant because it discusses the connection between the pandemic and growth in multi-level marketing using personal accounts. So it explains what it adds to the conversation, followed by author credentials. Bridget Reed is a journalist who works for The Cut, a magazine that focuses on life, culture, and politics. She has a Master of Arts from the University of East Anglia. So again, here's how it looks. You've got the introduction, you've got the formatted title, what are the different ways that multi-level marketing impacts those involved, an annotated bibliography. You have the introduction, and you have your different sections. Again, this one's a little different because it included a kind of put together the current conversation events section. So we're going to do, this is what you're doing, current conversation. So current conversation, name of the section, followed by the bibliographic citation and the annotation, followed by the next bibliographic citation, annotation, bibliographic citation, annotation. You get the pattern. It looks like a works cited page, but each one gets its own paragraph, and in that paragraph you have your summary, your contribution to the conversation, and the author background. And then your second category is background or context. That is it. And this sample is available on the assignment sheet. If you have any questions, please let me know. Peace.